Several years ago, I attended a talk by a nonfiction author of a book entitled A City on a Hill. The author described a pecking order among immigrants in New England, specifically in Lowell, Massachusetts. In New England in the 20th century, many of the immigrants came from Europe and sometimes by way of Canada, the Irish, the Italians, the Portuguese, the French Canadians. The author described how the most recent immigrants got the worst jobs, sometimes cleaning feces off of factory floors. This was also a golden age of manufacturing in the United States when many unskilled workers worked in factories. What I remember from this talk is this pecking order among immigrants, how immigrants who arrived in the US earlier treated poorly more recent immigrants. This brings to mind how President-elect Trump's policies on the economy and immigration apparently appealed to Latinos, Latin American men. He received more votes from this group in 2024 than in 2020, up about 14%. Some say that this group in battleground states helped him to secure the presidency. Some news sources reported that in his speeches, even though he talked of mass deportation, he distinguished Latinos from other migrants. Before I continue, let me say that the fact that the Republicans won the presidency in both houses of the legislature is maybe more clearly an expression of political will by the majority about the economy, and this includes Latinos. It's not okay that we're playing double for food at the grocery stores. That said, if it is the case that some Latinos voted for Trump in part because they were convinced by what he said about immigration, this is deeply troubling. Their decision here may have been based on poor reasoning. This includes the assumption that Latinos are not migrants and the argument that may go something like this: migrants who enter illegally and threaten native economic opportunities should be deported. Migrants enter illegally and they threaten native economic opportunities such as jobs and public resources, so therefore they should be deported. The only way that this argument helps and does not hinder the Latino vote is if Latinos assume that they are not included in the category migrants. There are several problems with this assumption that that's not me and the above argument. First, the pecking order described above involves a hierarchy based on time, similar to how senior employees have a higher status than junior employees. Older immigrants, those who arrived earlier, have a higher status than newer immigrants, those who arrived later. There is certainly some privilege and difference here, but the problem with this is a lack of empathy or solidarity for recent immigrants. It is as if older immigrants have forgotten their experience when they were at the bottom of the pecking order, or maybe they feel that they've paid their dues and can now treat poorly new or recent immigrants. Either way, there's a lack of empathy and a failure to recognize that not too long ago, they themselves were new immigrants. Second, maybe Latinos like Mexicans entered the country lawfully. This may be because they are lawfully present in the United States under laws that allowed for birthright or kinship immigration. Like myself, I benefited from kinship immigration. The problem with relying on existing immigration laws for their higher status is that the laws themselves are morally arbitrary, if not deeply problematic. Where a person happens to be born greatly impacts their future prospects and opportunities, but where a person is born is arbitrary from a moral perspective. Also, whether the law allows a person to enter lawfully as a refugee or as a relative of a current citizen is problematic. An administration often makes these determinations based on their own political agenda at the time. And by political here, I don't mean moral. The laws that decide who is legal and who is illegal are themselves deeply problematic. Third, maybe some think that they threaten economic opportunities. I've dealt with this elsewhere, where I lay out economic and moral arguments. But in short, it's false that new immigrants threaten the economy. Economists agree that while new immigrants may initially take unskilled jobs and rely on some public resources, a country experiences a net economic gain for migrants. You can be really short-sighted and feel threatened, or you can take a broader and more long-term view and recognize that any costs are more than offset by the benefits. This is why libertarians and, in the past, Republicans supported more open immigration policies. Immigration is generally good for the economy. Lastly, one tactic often used by political leaders is divide and conquer. The Hutus and Tutsis were one people in Rwanda until the Europeans separated them and convinced them that they were different. Latinos from Central and South America are not necessarily one people. They come from various countries and ethnic backgrounds and can be distinguished by their rich cultures and histories. I'm not saying that all Latinos are the same or that they have the same immigration status. But it's up to them how they identify themselves and distinguish themselves from others. It's not up to an outsider to label them one way and turn them against others. Trump may have won in part because he somehow convinced Mexicans or Puerto Ricans that they belonged here and deserved better than recent immigrants from places like Venezuela. We are all paying more for groceries, and some of us may struggle to find jobs, but we do well to work together to find solutions rather than to blame a scapegoat, usually recent immigrants. Sometimes I wonder how in the world something like the Japanese internment camps were possible in a democratic society, but we're not that far away now. We should recognize the problems with these tactics to create a pecking order or to divide and conquer, and instead stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters. We are all, in some way, immigrants.